So why are you here today?
I'm here today fighting for funding for public education. I don't feel like they should use taxpayers' dollars to pay for private schools. And if they do that, it is going to impact public education negatively. It's going to take funding away where they won't have special area classes like computer, art, music, and gym, and it's not fair to our children. So that's why I'm here today.
I'm here today because I'm a teacher, but I'm also a parent. And I understand my role is important and having my kids see what happens when we don't get what we need.
I'm here today to support my lovely teachers.
Yeah!
I'm here to fight for public education. I feel like our legislators are consciously trying to dismantle it, and if public educators don't come and stand up for public education, I don't think anybody will.
So I'm a public school teacher and also a public school parent. And I also teach history and political science. So for me, when I view a lot of the rhetoric around public education, I can go back decades and even centuries in our country in which we say that we want an informed citizenry. We want the best possible education for our students, our public. But it often comes up short and looks empty, a shell of a statement. So I want to make sure that what we have currently doesn't get chipped away at, and that we can continue to build upon what we have to make it the best that we can.
And give it to charters and health services.
Setting the stage for all of our Bourbon and Babies listeners. We are here in Louisville, Kentucky, and as you guys know, Jordan's a teacher, and school has been out 5 times in the last 2 weeks because of, quote, sick outs. What's a sick out?
Sick out is when a large enough number of teachers put in for sick days and there's not enough sub coverage to cover all those classes.
So you might be thinking, well, it is flu season. But this has nothing to do with the flu. This is a strategy by the teachers to be able to close down schools to put pressure on the government, because there are 2 significant bills that are heavily impacting not only our teachers, but ultimately the students of all of the school districts across Kentucky. So the teachers are calling in sick. Schools are closed, and they are in Frankfort protesting.
So we have a high school teacher from YPAS, Julie Evans, her husband, the beautiful Ben Evans, who teaches at No Middle School, and Jason Nelson, who's a social studies teacher at No Middle.
What, you're not going to call Jason beautiful too?
The gorgeous Jason Nelson, who I just met.
Do you feel left out, Julie?
No, I do not.
Sorry, I guess I pandered to my men. So today we're going to be discussing what's going on right now and why it's important, because I think, at least from looking on social media, which is unfortunately where most people get their information, and seeing the responses of parents who are mainly our audience who listen to this, a lot of them just don't understand what is going on and what is at stake for their kids in our educational system. So my goal with this episode is to make sure that they understand what it is and how it affects their kids and why it is that we're making our voices heard so loudly, even if it is at the inconvenience of them. So I want to start, actually, because I know one of the bills is going towards private schools and giving tax incentives for people to, I guess, give money towards these private schools and scholarships for kids to go to these private schools. So as a parent, you guys are all parents, and you're making the decision between public and private. What made you decide public versus private?
Diversity. It was huge. And, I went to school as a Catholic school kid, but I had 1 year of public school when I was in 3rd grade, and I loved it. And it's my favorite, memory of school is that 3rd grade. And actually the teacher strike happened in that 3rd grade when in 1976, 3 weeks, I think we were out. I'm not sure because I was in 3rd grade. I don't remember. But I remember that having a huge impact on me And our teachers were very clear and open with us about what they were standing up for and why, and that they cared about us and they cared about our learning, but that this is important for the future for education, not for them necessarily. Yes, for them, but that means for everybody. Because if your teachers aren't taken care of and, given a salary that they can really, that really supports them, then I worry for who's going to be taking care of our kids, who's going to be teaching our kids. I mean, we had to go to school, and most teachers I know have student loans to pay and whatever. So it's really important. Anyway, for me, public school was just a no-brainer.
Public versus private school is a very private decision, I think, that people make, and sometimes it's based on income, sometimes it's based on population diversity. There's lots of reasons why people would choose public over private. I think the reality that is, though, public schools are where the majority of our population are being educated. Okay, and what is so critical about the legislation that they're talking about right now, it sounds on its face like it's something cool, right? Okay, well, if I want to donate money, I can get a tax deduction by giving to a scholarship fund for a private school. That sounds like, okay, a tax deduction, woohoo! Why would I be against that? Why would I be against that?
You'll be against that because the actuary analysis of the bill suggests that it will cost the state $25 to $50 million per year. That money has to come from somewhere. So that's revenue that Kentucky's losing, which could potentially lead to further cuts in public education, social programs for people. So that's why it's significant. Without creating new revenue, continuing to make tax cuts hurts all of Kentucky, not just public schools, but it hurts our social services. It hurts our elderly. I mean, it hurts everybody.
So why is the government for having this tax incentive towards private schools? Like, what is it that has them wanting these private or charter schools to be building up in Kentucky?
I think their argument is that it's going to create more choice for parents. That's the argument that they're giving. I see it more as an issue of trying to privatize the public education system.
Tell me how it creates choice.
Their argument is it creates choice by the tax breaks could lead to them being able to send their kids to private schools. But if you look at the bill on its face, it's a charitable donation to a school that you get the tax break for. And the people who can afford to make those kinds of donations are people who can already afford private school. So while they say the intent is to help people with choice, people who may not be able to afford private school to enter private school, the bill on its face probably won't do that. It probably will only benefit those who can afford to make those donations.
That makes sense. So what then do you think the real goal is?
I think the real goal is privatization. Is to take public tax dollars and funnel them more into private organizations, whether those are charters, private schools, or any other organization.
What's the harm?
I think the harm is the oversight of that. You take a look at charter schools in the U.S. You have organizations that are granted a charter to run a public school, and they're giving full discretion over how that money is spent. These charter schools have committed fraud. These charter schools, for the most part, if you look at most of the research and the data, are not performing up to public schools. They're closing mid-year, leaving parents without places to go. You don't have to go very far. Just go to Nashville, go to Ohio, go to Michigan, and you'll see schools closing mid-year. And we're jumping on a train that most of the country is jumping off.
We as a state.
Yeah, as a state, Kentucky. So you have Minnesota was the first to go through this process, and Minnesota is reversing all of this now. Ohio is looking at legislation now that could potentially reverse charter schools. Tennessee seeing the effects. California, you take the Oakland strike, for example. Oakland, predominantly lower income part of California, they've been severely adversely affected by charter schools, which is one of the primary reasons they walked out.
Why then are we jumping on this bandwagon as a state? What's happening here?
Remember the old Mark Twain saying, right? When the end of the world comes, I want to be in Kentucky because it's 20 years behind.
I thought you were going to say quitting smoking's easy. I've done it 1,000 times.
Well, that too.
I don't know that that's true, but I mean, sometimes we feel like we need to make our own mistakes. I don't know.
And see, I think when I think about parents' perspective, if you can afford private school, I have friends that send their kids to private school because they want them to have a better education. Mm-hmm. And what worries me is the people who can't afford to go to private school. What then are we able to offer that population? Because that's the vast majority of the population. And those are the people that are contributing to society just as much as our wealthier kids that can afford to go to private school.
And right now, harping back on what Jason was saying about the $25+ million that are going to have to come out of the budget of pretty much the public school system, that population that goes to the public schools that has all these great resources at the school and these amazing programs. Speaking myself, my school, I think it's amazing and what we are able to provide, but it scares me to death to think about what $25 million could do to the programming that we offer at our school. Being
innovative programming that's really taking us to the next level and really looking at education in a new and interesting way and not 20 years in the past.
Yeah, and even the sponsors of the bill said that this will probably impact only about 1% of the student population. So it could lead to, 1% of students choosing the private school option over the public school option now, thanks to these tax breaks.
$25 million for 1%.
Yeah, so you're looking at a school that could lose 2 or 3 kids. Well, they don't lose staff. They don't lose the cost of the building.
Their overhead doesn't go down.
Yeah, overhead stays exactly the same, but they will lose the funding for that student. Mm. So it's estimated roughly $434 per child. So every child that a school loses, it's going to cost them about $434 in funding. So over the long run, when you put that out to the whole state, if every district loses 1% and they're losing $434 per child, the math, that's millions of dollars that the state will be losing toward public education.
So to push back on that a little bit, will $434 times 3 make that much of an impact on the school? What does that mean in terms of cuts?
Money comes out of the general budget. It's not coming out of the individual school budget. So now the state will have to make a decision. We've just lost millions. How do we allocate this money? So it could adversely affect some schools more than others. And particularly, it will adversely affect the county schools a lot more than JCPS, because JCPS...
Jefferson County Public Schools, which is located in the Louisville area.
Yeah. So our school district is the school district that has the majority of the private schools. If you go outside of Louisville, Kentucky, there's not a lot of private school options. So if you live in a rural county in eastern Kentucky, you're not taking advantage of this situation because there's not even a private school there for you. So when that money comes out of the general fund, it's going to adversely affect them.
Jason, that is such an interesting point. So what I'm hearing you say is that JCPS private schools sound like they are going to benefit the most if this legislation passes. They will and yet benefit. JCPS teachers are really leading the charge in pushing back against this legislation.
Public school
teachers.
Yeah.
Right. I know there's this sort of myth that, private versus public, private is this elite education, but you can get a fantastic education at public school, just as good as a private school. And I think that this is really about trying to preserve our ability to have that, to be able to offer an outstanding education to anybody in society, not just the wealthy families that can afford private school. At the bottom, the bottom line is that. The bottom line is preserving that and recognizing, through, I'm sure, some painful lessons in the past few years, we've learned to start to see these things coming over the horizon as a threat to public school. We've gotten burned very recently on our pensions, for instance, last year with some last minute shenanigans that gets pulled in Frankfort. And so
Sewer bills.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like things getting slipped into sewer bills at the last minute that have nothing to do with,
Can you clarify that for people who don't know?
I could let Jason clarify it further. But basically, I mean, there's some dirty pool that gets played sometimes in Frankfort that really hurts public education just in the recent past here. And that's eroded some of the trust that we would want to have, in our elected leaders to at least play fair politically. And the unfortunate side effect of that is that, we're learning to just stand up a little quicker and a little harder when we see these things coming, because we know it's the tip of a very big iceberg.
I feel like we're here mostly as proof that our legislators aren't really trusted by public teachers. And so we feel like we have to show up because we're so afraid they're going to sneak in something like they did with the sewer bill last year. And kind of have to stay till the last day because you never know what they're going to do.
Trust is the big point here. Louisville teachers don't trust the government anymore. And most Americans aren't trusting the government right now. So teachers are seeking out because they're afraid of what might happen, because there's evidence that it will happen.
So tell us about the evidence that it will happen.
So last year, at the last minute, toward the very end of the legislative session, they attached a pension bill onto a sewer bill. They gutted the sewer bill, turned it into a pension bill, and they avoided all legislative procedure because of that. The bill didn't get its proper readings. It didn't get its proper debate in the House or the Senate. They passed it very quickly in a matter of just hours. And it shocked people.
What did it result in?
Well, the bill itself would have completely overhauled our pension system and basically would have put us into a hybrid 401k system. It would have cost us it would have cost each individual teacher tens of thousands of dollars over their teaching career in retirement. The end result was Andy Beshear, our Attorney General, sued, and it went to the Kentucky Supreme Court. And the Kentucky Supreme Court ruled unanimously that they violated legislative procedure and making the bill null and void. So that's what teachers are afraid of this year. And that's what's, I think, leading to the movement now, leading to people wanting to stick out now, because they're afraid they'll pull that again. Mm-hmm. They'll attach it to a bill and these last couple of days of the session, try to ram it through, and we'll be back where we were last year.
And so the goal is to have the faces of the people who are actually impacted by this standing outside the offices of the legislators in Frankfort.
Mm-hmm. Let them know we're watching.
Yep. And it's important. It's worth mentioning right here, by the way, that teachers don't get to collect Social Security. So public school teachers, our pension is everything.
Right.
There's no Social Security for public school teachers. Mm-hmm. Like specifically, we're like one of the only.
Is that just in Kentucky?
It's Kentucky law, but it's not every state. But it is specifically, it's definitely here in Kentucky.
So you all are paying in what percentage every paycheck?
Oh, God. 13%.
13% of every paycheck is going to the Kentucky State Teachers Pension.
Yes.
And you cannot collect Social Security. So when you retire, you are depending on that pension to help pay for your retirement, like other Americans depend on Social Security.
The whole retirement. That's it.
And the average teacher pension per year is roughly around $35,000 annual. So you're talking about a pretty modest salary to live on after you retire. And that's what we're depending on.
And what is the state of the pension now?
Well, it used to be overfunded back in the day.
In 2002, it was 117% funded. Today, it's 37 or 38% funded.
Yeah. And how did that happen?
Legislatures, since 2002, started dipping into the fund.
Another reason that we don't trust what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Our money has been used to balance the budget, to fund state projects, and the state has never replenished that. And for several years, the legislature chose not to make its annual contribution to the fund, which has led to it being so severely defunded right now. And there are portions of our money invested in hedge funds that we are not aware of. because we're not made aware of those, because the legislature can keep
How is this legal? I keep coming back to, my whole career I've worked in nonprofits, and we have these funds that people donate their money to, and there's a lot of oversight, and you have to have written permission to access these funds for a purpose other than what it was originally intended for. How did this happen?
We need new legislation that addresses that too.
I guess in Kentucky you're allowed to dip into it. It's similar to Social Security on the national level. The federal government dips into Social Security. Mm-hmm. They borrow against Social Security, and now you hear on the national level that Social Security is in trouble. It's the same concept. Mm-hmm. If you leave Social Security and you leave a pension system alone, allow the people to pay into it, it funds itself. As long as the money's invested conservatively, and there is oversight, and you never tap into that, it will be self-sustaining. And one of the things that teachers are pushing back against is this idea that our system needs to be overhauled, that somehow it's broken. And that's the message that legislators are sending out to the public, that it's a broken system. They broke the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the pension isn't the broken part of the system. Yes. The broken part is essentially illegal maneuvers dipping into something that shouldn't be touched.
An actuary analysis showed that if you didn't do anything at all, if we just left the pension system alone and the state made its annual contribution the way it should, it will return to being fully funded in 2030. So all we have to do is leave it alone, don't borrow against it, let us keep our money.
What I wonder is, it's interesting because we were talking about public versus private, and what would happen if we privatized the pension? Mm-hmm. Would we be in better shape now? And does that argument then push against this whole public-private?
That was the push last year with the sewer bill. They wanted to move us into this 401k type of pension. Now, 401ks were designed as a supplement to retirement. They're not good as your primary source for retirement. They generally get a smaller return than the pension will.
Because the government supports the pension.
You're looking for a guaranteed safety net. I think that's why Social Security just like rules and regulations don't sort of materialize out of thin air, they evolve out of a legitimate need that comes up that's not currently being addressed. And so we write rules and regulations. Social Security evolved from a need, to not have old people starving in the streets, basically, and, sort of like the bare minimum safety net that you need to not have a society fall apart after retirement age. And it's, I'm sure those who are living on Social Security know it's not a ton of money, but it's enough for you to get by.
Right.
Basically. Exactly. And it's guaranteed. That's the whole point, is that it's low risk, low reward, but low risk, right? And so privatizing something like that, your reward might be higher when the stock market's good or something like that. But if things crash or things go, in the tank, now you're back on the street starving again. And so you want to avoid that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to point out, if you work in a private sector job and you have a 401k option, that's what it is. It's an option for you.
And most of the time your company's contributing towards that.
You're getting matched.
They're matching,
for that. So when they proposed this overhaul last year, it wasn't an option for us. They just told us that we were going to be forced to participate in this 401k hybrid plan. We had no idea how that money would get invested. You have no idea what your return was going to be. As a employee, I might choose to want to opt out of something like that and handle my own retirement. But under that plan, I would not have been able to do so.
But they're going to keep taking 13% of your
money
paycheck.
Out of my check. And, under that system, they claimed that there would be a match. But our question was, where's that money going to come from?
And where is it written?
That's a significant amount of money you're asking Kentucky taxpayers to pay to match our retirement now, when we currently fund the majority of our pension system.
Interesting.
So is 525 is really the bill now that we're looking at the
replacing
that's the big
members.
Yeah, that's the big bill right now that we are still fighting against.
Okay. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so House Bill 525 changes teacher representation on the Board of Trustees, which oversees how our money gets invested. Currently, there's 11 members on that board who come from various educational organizations, and they also come from 2 governor appointees, and then I believe that there's some business representation, like Chamber of Commerce. They want to take it down from 7 to 2.
To teacher representation.
2. So right now, the Kentucky Education Association nominates, and then teachers all over the state, every teacher has a say in who gets selected for those 7 positions. So we choose our 7 representatives on that board, which gives us currently a majority say in how our money gets invested.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. Diluting that down to 2 means that we lose that majority of how our money gets invested. The legislators argue that the people they're appointing or adding to the process are also educators or affiliated with some type of educational association. And it's just not true. Like one of the organizations they named CAPE, the Kentucky Association of Public Educators, don't represent Kentucky teachers. They're a private interest organization. They've been pretty clear about that for some time. They don't represent us. So giving them say on the board doesn't give teachers say like they claim it does. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're fighting back. We want to save our pensions. We want to keep control of our money and how it gets invested. And we want to make sure it's invested wisely and it's not funneled into higher fee hedge funds or anything like that. Could potentially cost us money in the long run.
So why are you here today?
I am here to support my public school and so that Matt Bevins doesn't take money from any of my teachers again.
I'm here to support all teachers and support public education and my education, which is my future. Thank you.
Anybody want to add to that?
Yes, I came from my mother. She's a teacher, and I've grown up and loved so many teachers, and I just care about everyone here and everyone's future.
Can you talk about HB 205?
My understanding, the bill gives you a tax credit for making a charitable donation to a private school. 205, and I believe there's a threshold on that for your annual income. I think that's at $92,000. So the idea is you give a tax credit to a family for making a charitable donation to a school, which will open up more opportunities
to a private school
for lower income children to attend private school, to give them that option or that choice.
But I was reading that there are states where there are tens of thousands of students on the waiting list for these scholarships, and that it just has not been working. They've tried it and it hasn't worked. So why are we trying to do what already has proven to not work?
Mm-hmm. I think that goes back to that.
Again,
we're always
that question answers itself.
Kentucky.
We're always last to the table, right? I mean, we here in Kentucky we don't have the foresight to pay attention to what's going on around us. And part of that, I mean, and as a parent, you have your busy life. You get your kids to school, you got work. Paying attention to all of this is difficult. Mm-hmm. Knowing everything that's happening is difficult. I think, which is why there is some pushback this year. I think more people support us than not. But last year, the mission was clear. It was stop this sewer bill. The sewer bill is disastrous for us.
Right.
This year, we're fighting multiple bills. And the public doesn't fully understand each individual bill and why we're fighting it. And then we're also fighting the bigger picture, which is privatization of public education.
Right.
Because the majority of people will not have access to private schools. And if we put our public education in the hands of private organizations, who is to ensure that they are going to be serving the best interests of children or their own?
I have to say this. It feels very intentional that it's multiple bills at one time to make it difficult for educators to communicate what their interests are in this and to make it difficult for parents to truly understand that the wool is being pulled over their eyes.
Yes. And if you study the pattern, this is the same pattern that has occurred in every state that has gone through this prior to us. There is a specific game plan that they follow. They follow these steps, and it's happened all over the country, and we are one of the last battlegrounds.
Which is part of what I think concerns teachers so much is when you lose something, it's really hard to get it back.
Well, speaking of that, so yesterday, SB 250 passed in the House, and now it's waiting for signature from the governor, who I'm sure is going to sign.
What is that?
And that is taking away power of the schools with their school-based decision-making teams to appoint their principals and giving the superintendent supreme right to, in a sense, veto their decisions and say, no, I think this is a better decision. And while schools know their own communities best, they know what their community needs because each school is a community, they should be the ones making that decision. And right now, we have, I think, a really good superintendent who has our best interest at mind, but who knows who's going to be in that position in the future.
How is the superintendent chosen?
How is it?
The Kentucky Board, the local Board of Education.
And who's on the local Board of Education?
You have a cross-section of community members on that board right now. For example, we have a representative, an educator from Spalding University. Sometimes you will have members of the business community. They're elected positions.
And who elects them? The general population?
The general population of Louisville. Yeah.
So the reason I ask all of that is because one of my biggest takeaways from this whole situation, the stick out and all of these bills and trying to understand and dig in to what all of this means is we have to be more aware and we have to dig in and actually go out and vote. We would not be in this position if we as a community hadn't just not shown up at the polls. I mean, the reality is, I wish I knew the percentage, but something like only 20 or 30%.
Less than a third,
yeah. Yeah, less than a third of the population voted in the last election. That is extremely problematic. And that is how we get these people in power who do not have our best interests at heart.
Yep. And I think the general principle is anytime you see somebody in government trying to make things less democratic, small d democratic, like less transparent self-governance, that should be like a red flag just as a matter of principle at every step of the way, right? Society tends to function better. We live in a democracy in theory, and it tends to function better when, and this was, person after person yesterday on the floor of the House spoke to this passionately about the right to self-governance and how important that is in this country and in communities like Louisville and all over the state. And when that starts to get stripped away, that's a huge red flag because that's a slippery slope toward sort of authoritarianism, if you will. Mm-hmm. We're seeing that a little bit in this country already. And that should be just a disqualifier straight up for a piece of legislation or an elected official to be pushing in that direction. That should just be a giant warning, like, okay, this person's intentions are not honorable. They're not trying to preserve the very thing that they're a part of, which is self-governance.
Yeah, and that goes back to the special interests. There's a lot of outside organizations that are influence legislation in Kentucky. And it happens all over the country. It happens on the federal level. People lobby. There's a lot of money thrown at this. And it's and what they're promoting isn't always best for Kentucky. It's not best for the citizens. But there are large groups of people who will benefit greatly to being able to funnel public tax dollars into charter schools or private investments or anything like that, any idea of privatization. This push started probably 30, 40 years ago where a large portion of the business community decided it was a great idea to capitalize on public tax dollars. And today, their efforts are paying off. You see that all over the country now. People are wanting to privatize almost every portion of government. And when you do that, who's in charge? The question becomes, does that organization or whoever is running that organization have the best interests of the people at heart? Or are they just trying to make a buck?
Because that's their bottom line, right? Yeah. If it's a for-profit company, that's the bottom line is growth and making money, not looking at
your tax dollars just become a new market. For that.
Yeah.
So it's an ingenious market. Yeah. It really is. It's an ingenious market because it's always there. You don't have to provide a quality product. You don't have, this idea of free market. You're going to provide a quality product and let the consumer decide whether they want it or not. I teach supply and demand in my 8th grade social studies class. I mean, it's a pretty basic concept. And they know that as long as taxes are inevitable, we have to pay them. The government will distribute them. And as long as they can get some of that money, that is a constant revenue stream for them. And what they provide doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I want to bring this to the sick outs because there has been such a huge response to them, both for in support of teachers and against, because a whole lot of people are inconvenienced by it. I mean, let's be honest, we're parents. We all have kids that go to public schools and they're out of school right now. And lucky for us, we are teachers. And when we're not at school, we could be with them. But there's a lot of people in our community who can't, who are struggling with this because when their kids are out of school, they can't make money. And I've been seeing...
even not being able to make money, but even if they can go and make money, paying a program to take care of their kids during the day is something they did not budget for.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate side that I feel bad about as an educator, but I am hugely thankful to the families that are showing the support and understanding why we're doing this. And that's what I'm hoping through this episode, people could understand why this is happening. I have friends on my social media who have commented on posts I've made asking those same questions and saying, when we are there protesting, are we still getting paid?
No.
Are we still getting paid on these sick out days?
No.
Well, I mean, we're using
Do you have a sick day?
Do you have a sick
day?
Is
that a paid sick day?
They don't. They're not sick days anymore. As soon as school is out, there's no sick day.
What school is called, it's not an official sick day. School has been canceled. We will make up the day. We will get paid for the day we make up.
Exactly.
Yeah, so...
As a regular school day, though. And because we're teaching on it.
Well, now, we're extending our school year.
Wait, so will your sick days count as sick days?
No.
No, this won't count against sick days once school.
We keep our sick day because the superintendent made a call to close the school for the day.
But we'll make up that day.
This is what people are saying in terms of reloading the sick days.
This was the governor's argument. The governor's argument is our sick days are getting returned to us. It's a half truth. It's what he's good at. He's good at just playing the situation to get the public to turn on teachers. But in reality, we are making this day up. We are coming back to work. Mm-hmm. We're not missing a school day. Mm-hmm. Contractually, teachers work 187 days a year. And no matter how many times we call in, we will work 187 days this school year. Mm-hmm. Every day will be made up.
You can think of it as a day of summer vacation that's getting taken now and used by many of us to go sit in Frankfort in a Capitol building protesting our legislators for 8 hours or something like that.
And we would much rather be on the beach in June.
Right.
Yeah, it's not what we would want to do with our summer break.
And you're making a great point there. I mean, one, I get that it's inconvenient for parents who have planned vacations at the beginning of June. They shouldn't do that anyway because we've seen with weather in the last couple of years that because of snow, we often will go into June anyway. But Jordan, for example, was going to be teaching a camp. Many of our teachers, many of you guys, go and do other things over the summer to make up for the pitiful income.
We have to supplement over the summer. It's
right.
It's not vacation
and now
us,
because school is going later and later, that camp won't happen anymore. And
or if it does, I probably won't be able to teach
That's a big chunk of income that he's going to lose. So
the fact of the matter is it's inconvenient for everybody on some level. And so deepest sympathies to parents who are inconvenienced, understand that fully. But it is a near-term short inconvenience to preserve a long-term, very important, very huge thing that we all benefit from when it works well, and we all suffer from when it doesn't work well, and that's public education.
Right.
Yeah. And so yes, we've got to keep the big picture in mind. It kind of stinks in the short term for all of us, really. I mean, I think teachers don't get into teaching to not go to school and teach. They get into teaching because they want to teach kids. Mm-hmm. And, teachers generally want to be in school doing their job and doing it well. And, nobody wants to spend their entire day sitting in the floor of the rotunda in the Capitol building for 8 hours not eating and not getting paid for it. So,
and plus as a teacher, right now every day we're not there, I'm thinking of all the stuff that my kids are falling behind on. And yes, I'm an itinerant teacher, but we have performances coming up. We have things that we're preparing the kids for, and we're losing momentum now with every day we're out. So it's not just, the parents and their inconvenience. It's inconvenient for me as well, but I see this as more important right now, and I'm prioritizing. And
we're playing the long game.
Exactly. And, looking at the strikes that have happened this last year all over the country, we had West Virginia, we had Arizona, Oklahoma, obviously Kentucky, Colorado, North Carolina, and LA. And, thinking of what can happen as a result if everybody bands together and supports this, and there's not the opposition there and people arguing with one another. In LA, they won a new contract. They got a 6% pay increase, reduced class sizes, increase of nurses, counselors, librarians, less standardized testing, and a new district endorsement called Schools and Communities First. And that was with 98% participation by teachers and also parents and community members.
And there's a sort of larger picture to all of this, which is, and I'm just going to say the dirty word strike, we don't have, as teachers in Kentucky, we don't have the quote unquote right to strike. We're not allowed to strike.
Right.
And
legally.
Yeah. Oh. And that's part of this weakening of unions that's happened for decades now across the country. We're certainly emblematic of that in this state. And unfortunately, it means it's harder to, when you're 10,000 teachers or however many thousands of teachers, each teacher only has a very tiny bit of leverage. They don't have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of political clout. Their only leverage is in pooling all 10,000 or however many thousand teachers there are and acting collectively versus oftentimes very well-funded interests that have a very high concentration of power and a very few people who can act decisively, quickly, with a lot of resources to get what they want. And so it's not an accident that that's been stripped away from us in the last few decades. And we no longer have that right, which in my personal opinion, and I'm a new teacher, by the way, so I don't speak for teachers across the state by any means, and I'm just learning a lot of this stuff. But it seems to me that every time we protest something, part of our protest ought to be to reclaim the right to organize in that way, because everything that most people like about how work works in this country was achieved through strikes decades ago, in the last century, through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and the ability to strike, the 40-hour work week, having weekends. I mean, all those things didn't exist until people got together and said, wait a second, there's got to be a better way to do this where we can preserve our sanity while still moving forward as a society. And to not have the right to do that as workers in the state is, I think, crazy.
Especially in a right to work state.
Right. And to not be able to say the word strike, right? Call things what they are, have to do these weird workarounds. It's frustrating and it's disempowering and it's not an accident. And that's why you see every year this little flood of bills coming through to try to continue to strip away, to continue to defund public education and to continue to strip away the rights and the funding of teachers. We're not allowed to fight that in the way that we should be able to even the playing field. And that's unfortunate. And it would be a lot easier on parents if, in some of these other places, they have been able to strike. And LA was successful because they were able to organize. Everybody was on message. They acted very, in a very unified way, and they were able to achieve a lot to the benefit of the public school system and the students and the parents that they serve. And, I think that's something that we need to, long-term, we need to reclaim. But in the meantime, we at least need to, stop the bleeding where it's happening, do some triage, and then, go on the offensive and try to reclaim some of these things that have been taken away. That's my 2 cents. I don't speak for all teachers, but as a new guy, that's what I'm seeing.
Acting now, seeking out now, is to try to make sure that they know we're there, we're watching, we're listening. If they try to implement something quickly, we will call them on that procedural process that they must follow, and we will be able to get information out quicker than we were able to do last year. And I think the other thing is people need to look at the big picture. And I've thought about this a lot. When next year, 2020 legislative session, it's a 60-day session, and it's a budget year. So those lawmakers need to know where we stand. And I think parents who support us need to start letting those lawmakers now know where we stand. From the end of this session all the way through until next January, because they can throw everything in the kitchen sink at us because it's a budget year. When you email or contact a legislator, they're not reading or listening to your voicemail. They don't have the time to do that. But that information is being logged on what's called a green slip. And that green slip is placed on the lawmaker's desk for or against whatever. It has a quick message on it, where their constituent is from. And when they get inundated with green slips from their constituents, they know that they need to either act or adjust or continue what they're doing, whatever, they're asking them to do. And I've heard a lot of them make comments that, there was a representative from Woodford County, I don't remember his name, but he spoke yesterday on this in the House. And he says, I have a stack of green slips on my desk right now, and I can't sort through them all. There's so many, so I'm going to vote no for this bill because overwhelmingly people are saying they don't want this bill.
And if they don't listen, they'll pay the price at election if we all go out and vote.
Yes! And if our elections are more publicly funded. I mean, we get back to, so public education, it's not just public education, it's the word public. I mean, public is democracy in action, really. Mm-hmm. When we have elections that are not funded by the public, but rather funded by private interests, very well-funded private interests, then those politicians don't work for us anymore, and it shouldn't surprise us that they're not doing what we ask them, that they're ignoring our voices.
Last question, because I think this is a good spot to end on. When they go out and vote, are there resources that parents can go to, not just in Kentucky, but generally, things that parents should think about if they want to have their kids' public education represented?
One of the more inspiring videos I saw yesterday was from a student in Manual High School who said, if you've been paying any attention to this, you know that we all have a huge stake in this. If you're a student, yeah, we don't have school. Maybe you like not having school for a day, but you should be in Frankfort, standing up with the teachers, because at the end of the day, we, the students, are the ones who are going to pay the price if public education gets cut and if teachers suffer. And you can't incentivize good teachers to apply for the job anymore. Yeah. And he gets the big picture, and he said, every parent of JCPS, if they can make it, of a JCPS student, if they can make it to Frankfort, should be there. Every student who can make it to Frankfort should be there. And every teacher who can make it to Frankfort should be there. I mean, we should be flooding the Capitol with thousands and thousands of people and intimidating our legislators into doing the right thing and showing them what's going to happen again and again if they try to pull.
And if you can't be there, email or call so that the green slip will be there. And also, if you're outside of Kentucky, one of the things I want to make sure we come back to is this Board of Education. Because the Board of Education does have a lot of power, and it's a lot of candidates, and I know I am guilty of going to the polls sometimes and not being fully informed on who I should vote for. Is there a resource out there?
I think that resource is fragmented a little bit. I really do. The Kentucky 120 group is doing a really good job, and they have a parent page, Kentucky 120 United parent page. You can probably search that on Facebook and find it. They're doing a pretty decent job of getting information to parents. But I think that we as teachers need to do a better job of disseminating information to parents. They lead busy lives just like we do. So asking them to go out and research all these issues, especially when there's multiple bills on the table, is probably asking too much of them. So I think we as a educating community need to do a little bit better getting that information to parents.
But what we can do is ask our teachers, ask our teacher friends, ask our kids' teachers and say, hey, this is coming up. Where's the resource? What is it? Because what I'm hearing you say is there's different communities. And I think for people that live outside of Kentucky that are listening, there are different communities there too. But if we need to have conversations with our teachers, we need to stop and think and ask instead of making assumptions and listening to the general media, which is going to be biased in one direction or another.
Or just wants to drum up. I mean, they want to cover an interesting story, and so they try to foment drama. Yeah.
And speaking of teachers, we need to get ourselves to Frankfort.
Yes.
But I'm going to leave you all with a montage of things that I recorded yesterday in Frankfort, reasons why teachers, parents, and students were there. And what I love about this is it wasn't all just pension, which is what so many people think. There were so many different answers that I got and so many reasons that people were there, and just their support meant so much to me, as I'm sure it does to all you. I want to thank you all for being here to hopefully clarify for people who don't know what it is that's going on and why it is that we're doing these sick outs and why it is so important to us and our kids and the future of education. So until next week, thank you for listening to Bourbon and Babies.
So why are you here today in Frankfort?
To put it as simply as possible, because the fight for education for our kids is literally a fight for the future, and that's what we're here for. We are fighting for a better generation.
I'm here in Frankfort today to stand for my students. I love them like my own, and I want the best for them. I can also be a good example for standing up for what you believe in by showing up here today.
I do not think that continual cuts to public education is in the best interest of the future of Kentucky.
Part of the reason why I'm here today is I want our community to know that teachers are here, yes, in support of our profession, but also in support of the public school system and our students. Our students are the main reason why we're here, and it seems like a lot of the public isn't really getting that because they're inconvenienced by the fact that we're here, but we're not here just for teachers, we're here for students too.
I'm in Frankfort to be an advocate for my children who I brought with me today because they are public school students. I want to keep them in public school, and without the funding, the programs that they love the most, such as the arts, and yes, being bused for 45 minutes a day to their school each way is important because that's what they love most, and I cannot afford for those programs to be cut away from them.
Well, I'm here personally for my own kids, my own children, as well as the kids that I teach because their education is threatened.
To support people and teachers.
To fight for my students.
Support teachers. We believe it's wrong that, teachers are putting in $200,000 into retirement, and then the government sees it as free money to take, and it's just wrong because when they retire, they don't have anything to take out.
Yeah. Absolutely. Why are you here today?
Support the union and support what teachers are trying to do because, as he said, it is very unjust and unethical that the government is taking all this money that they worked for. And it's very important that not just the teachers but also those that are closely, related to the teachers also help support them.
There's only one reason they would want to take over a position that's been working for 80 years, and that's to get a hold of our money. And there's no reason to change a system that's actually showed year after year after year that the election process to the Kentucky Retirement Teacher Board is the way for it to be, and they don't need to be a part of it.
Thank you.
I'm here to fight for our students because they deserve everything that a public education would offer. Services for ECE and extra services for different learning. So we just want everybody to get the right treatment for a free public education.
Absolutely. Why did I go to Frankfort? So my voice could be heard. Thank you to all those that stood with us, whose voices were heard as we fight for what the future of education can be and should be.
And give it to charters and health services.